Okay, girls, we're going to finish up chapter 13 of Harry Potter. Okay, the last part we were at, it was Valentine's Day, and that little dwarf sang a song for Harry, okay? Harry would have given all the gold and green gods to evaporate on the spot. Trying valiantly to laugh along with everyone else, he got up, his feet numb from the weight of the dwarf, as Percy Weasley did his best to disperse the crowd, some of whom were crying with mirth. I think mirth means that they're super happy or they're just, they've been laughing so much. Off you go. The bell rang 5 minutes ago. Off to class now, he said, shooing some of the younger students away. And you, Malfoy. Harry, glancing over, saw Malfoy stoop and snatch up something. Leering, he showed it to Crabbe and Goyle, and Harry realized he'd gotten Riddle's diary. "Give that back," said Harry quietly. "Wonder what Potter's written in this," said Malfoy, who obviously hadn't noticed the year on the cover and thought he had Harry's own diary. A hush fell over the onlookers. Ginny was staring from the diary to Harry, looking terrified. "Hand it over, Malfoy," said Percy sternly. "When I've had a look," said Malfoy, waving the diary tauntingly at Harry. Percy said, "As a school prefect," but Harry had lost his temper. He pulled out his wand and shouted, "Expelliarmus!" And just as Snape had disarmed Lockhart, so Malfoy found the diary shooting out of his hand up into the air. Ron, grinning broadly, caught it. "Harry," said Percy loudly, "no magic in the corridors. I'll have to report this, you know." But Harry didn't care. He was one up on Malfoy, and that was worth 5 points from Gryffindor any day. Malfoy was looking furious, and as Ginny passed him to enter her classroom, he yelled spitefully at her, "I don't think Potter liked your Valentine very much." Ginny covered her face with her hands and ran into class. Snarling, Ron pulled out his wand too, but Harry pulled him away. Ron didn't need to spend the whole of terms belching slugs. It wasn't until they had reached Professor Flitwick's class that Harry noticed something rather odd about Riddle's diary. All his other books were drenched in scarlet ink. The diary, however, was as clean as it had been before the ink bottle had smashed all over it. He tried to point this out to Ron, but Ron was having trouble with his wand again. Large purple bubbles were blossoming out of the end, and he wasn't much interested in anything else. Harry went to bed before anyone else in his dormitory that night. This was partly because he didn't think he could stand Fred and George singing "His eyes are as green as a fresh pickled toad" one more time, and partly because he wanted to examine Riddle's diary again, and knew that Ron thought he was wasting his time. Sorry. Ugh. Harry sat on his four-poster and flicked through the blank pages, not one of which had a trace of scarlet ink on it. Then he pulled a new bottle out of his bedside cabinet, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot onto the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second, and then, as though it was being sucked into the page, vanished. Excited, Harry loaded up his quill a second time and wrote, "My name is Harry Potter." The words shone momentarily on the page, and they too sank without a trace. Then, at last, something happened. Oozing out of the page in his very own ink came words Harry had never written. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary?" These words too faded away, but not before Harry had started to scribble back. "Someone tried to flush it down a toilet." He waited eagerly for Riddle's reply. "Luckily that I recorded my memories in some more lasting way than ink, but I always knew that there would be those who would not want this diary read." "What do you mean?" Harry scrawled, blotting his page in excitement. "Okay. I mean, this diary holds memories of terrible things. Things that were covered up. Things that happened at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. That's where I am now, Harry wrote quickly. I'm at Hogwarts, and horrible stuff's been happening. Do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets? His heart was hammering. Riddle's reply came quickly, his writing becoming untidier, as though he was hurrying to tell all he knew. Of course I know about the Chamber of Secrets. In my day, they told us it was a legend that did not exist, but this was a lie. In my 5th year, the chamber was opened and the monster attacked several students, finally killing one. I caught the person who opened the chamber and he was expelled, but the headmaster, Professor Dippet, ashamed that such a thing happened at Hogwarts, forbade me to tell the truth. The story was given out that the girl had died in a freak accident. They gave me a nice, shiny, engraved trophy for my trouble and warned me to keep my mouth shut, but I knew it could happen again. The monster lived on, and the one who had the power to release it was not imprisoned. Harry nearly upset his ink bottle in his hurry to write back. It's happening again now. There have been 3 attacks, and no one seems to know who's behind them. Who was it last time? I can show you if you like, came Riddle's reply. You don't have to take my word for it. I can take you inside my memory of the night when I caught him. Harry hesitated, his quill suspended over the diary. What did Riddle mean? How could he be taken inside someone else's memory? He glanced nervously at the door to the dormitory, which was growing dark. What did we left in this chapter? Okay. Which was growing dark. When he looked back at the diary, he saw fresh words forming. Let me show you. Harry paused for a fraction of a second and then wrote 2 letters. OK. The pages of the diary began to blow as though caught in a high wind, stopping halfway through the month of June. Mouth hanging open, Harry saw that the little square for June 13th seemed to have turned into a minuscule television screen. Minuscule means really little. His hands trembling slightly, he raised the book to press his eye against the little window, and before he knew what was happening, he was tilting forward. The window was widening. He felt his body leave his bed, and he pitched headfirst through the opening in the page into a whirl of color and shadow. He felt his feet hit solid ground and stood shaking as the blurred shapes around him suddenly came into focus. He knew immediately where he was. The circular room with the sleeping portraits was Dumbledore's office, but it wasn't Dumbledore who was sitting behind the desk. The wizened, frail-looking wizard, bald except for a few wisps of white hair, was reading a letter by candlelight. Harry had never seen this man before. I'm sorry, he said shakily. I didn't mean to butt in. But the wizard didn't look up. He continued to read, frowning slightly. Harry drew nearer to his desk and stammered, I'll just go, shall I? Still the wizard ignored him. He didn't seem even to have heard him. Thinking that wizard might be deaf, Harry raised his voice. Sorry I disturbed you. I'll go now, he half shouted. The wizard folded up the letter with a sigh, stood up, walked past Harry without glancing at him, and went to draw the curtains at his window. The sky outside the window was ruby red. It seemed to be sunset. The wizard went back to the desk, sat down, twiddled his thumbs, watching the door. Harry looked around the office. No Fawkes the Phoenix, no worrying silver contraptions. This was Hogwarts as Riddle had known it, meaning that this unknown wizard was headmaster, not Dumbledore, and he, Harry, was a little more than a phantom, completely invisible to people 50 years ago. There was a knock on the office door. Enter, said the old wizard in a feeble voice. A boy of about 16 entered, taking off his pointed hat. A silver prefix badge was glinting on his chest. He was much taller than Harry, but he, too, had jet black hair. Ah, Riddle, said the headmaster. You wanted to see me, Professor Dippet? Said Riddle. He looked nervous. Sit down, said Dippet. I've just been reading the letter you sent me. Oh, said Riddle. He sat down, gripping his hands together very tightly. My dear boy, said Dippet kindly, I cannot possibly let you stay at school over the summer. Surely you want to go home for the holidays." "No," said Riddle at once. I'd much rather stay at Hogwarts than go back to that. You live in a Muggle orphanage during the holidays, I believe?" said Dippet curiously. "Yes, sir," said Riddle, reddening slightly. "You are a Muggle born?" "Half-blood, sir," said Riddle. "Muggle father, witch mother." "And both your parents—" "My mother died just after I was born, sir. They told me at the orphanage she lived just along to name me. Tom after my father, Marvolo after my grandfather." Dippet clucked his tongue sympathetically. "The thing is, Tom," he sighed, "special arrangements might have been made for you, but in the current circumstances—" "You mean all these attacks, sir?" said Riddle. Harry's heart leapt as he moved closer, scared of missing anything. "Precisely," said the headmaster. "My dear boy, you must see how foolish it would be of me to allow you to remain at the castle when term ends, particularly in light of the recent tragedy, the death of that poor little girl. You will be safer by far at your orphanage. As a matter of fact, the Ministry of Magic is now even talking about clothing the school. We are no nearer locating the source of all this unpleasantness." Riddle's eyes widened. "Sir, if the person was caught, if it all stopped—" "What do you mean?" said Dippet with a squeak in his voice, sitting up in his chair. "Riddle, do you mean you know something about these attacks?" "No, sir," said Riddle quickly, but Harry was sure it was the same sort of no that he himself had given Dumbledore. Dippet sank back, looking faintly disappointed. "You may go, Tom." Riddle slid off his chair and slouched out of the room. Harry followed him. Down the moving spiral staircase they went, emerging next to the gargoyle in the darkening corridor. Riddle stopped, and so did Harry, watching him. Harry could tell that Riddle was doing some serious thinking. He was biting his lip, his forehead furrowed. His forehead furrowed when he did this. Then, as though he had suddenly reached a decision, he hurried off, Harry gliding noiselessly behind him. They didn't see another person until they reached the entrance hall, when a tall wizard with long, sweeping auburn hair and a beard called to Riddle from the marble staircase. What are you doing, wandering around this late, Tom?" Harry gaped at the wizard. He was none other than a 50-year younger Dumbledore. "I had to see the headmaster, sir," said Riddle. "Well, hurry off to bed," said Dumbledore, giving Riddle exactly the kind of penetrating stare Harry knew so well. "Best not to roam the corridors these days. Not since—" He sighed heavily, bade Riddle good night, and strode off. Riddle watched him walk out of sight, and then, moving quickly, headed straight down the stone steps to the dungeon, with Harry in hot pursuit. But to Harry's disappointment, Riddle led him not into a hidden passageway or secret tunnel, but to the very dungeon in which Harry had potions with Snape. The torches hadn't been lit, and when Riddle pushed the door almost closed, Harry could only just see him standing stock still by the door, watching the passage outside. Alright, that's it for today. There's just a couple more pages left that I'll read tomorrow for you. Love you, girls.